I know this is going to sound backwards, but the most hated form of silver in stacking communities today might actually be the most efficient way to build silver volume. It is less liquid, it's less clean, and it doesn't look like modern bullion, but mathematically, it may outperform fractional silver where it matters most: ounces per dollar. And today I want to show you why I think 90% constitutional silver might be one of the most misunderstood forms of fractional silver in the entire silver market. Good morning, it's today again. Welcome back to Joseph's Reserves. I'm Joseph, and I store 20% of my income in the form of rare coins and precious metals. Before I start, congratulations to Matt M for being the first to comment on my last video. Thank you for your support, Matt. Y'all go down into the comments to find him and start a conversation. Today, I want to answer the question that I feel most stackers never actually look at correctly. Is 90% silver comparable to regular silver bullion? Now, I need to be very clear in the beginning. I'm not talking about liquidity. I'm not talking about aesthetics. I'm not talking about ease of resale. I'm talking about one thing. How efficiently does your dollar convert into silver ounces? Because if you're dollar cost averaging, that question matters a lot more than most people realize. Before we get into the numbers, let's make sure everyone understands what 90% silver actually is. These are United States coins minted before 1965. They usually include 7 different series: the Mercury dimes and the Roosevelt dimes, the Standing Liberty quarters and Washington quarters, the Walking Liberty halves, the Franklin halves, and the Kennedy halves. These coins were not collectibles, they were just made to circulate. They were not investment products, they were simply money. People spent them in grocery stores and they circulated in everyday life. They were a part of the normal economy. Today, some people call them junk silver, not because they're worthless, but because they're no longer circulating currency, and most of them carry the value primarily based on silver content, not collectability. And that distinction matters because it means 90% silver is not a product that was designed to be pretty. It's a product that was designed to be used. And because of that, when I buy 90% silver, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for shine. I'm not looking for proof condition. But if I do see one, I'm not going to ignore it. What I'm mostly looking for is efficiency. Because in my system, there are only 2 questions that matter: how many ounces did I acquire, and how much did I pay per ounce? Everything else is somewhat secondary. Now, most stackers compare this silver incorrectly. They compare 90% silver to 1 ounce rounds, and that's not a fair comparison. The real comparison we have to look at is 90% silver and fractional bullion, 1/10 ounce silver, because those serve the same purpose. They let you stack in smaller units. So today we're going to compare them directly. Alright, so I'm about to throw a whole bunch of numbers at you, but I'll make sure that the key numbers stay on the screen and are highlighted for you. So at the time of recording this, silver spot is $69.15 per ounce. I pulled pricing directly from an online dealer. 1/10 ounce silver costs approximately $108.90 per ounce, and they're buying it back at $63 per ounce, which creates a spread of $45.90 per ounce. If we compare that to 90% silver, we could pick it up for $73.78 per ounce, and the dealer's buying it back at $45.26 per ounce, which creates a spread of $28.52 per ounce. Okay, that was all the numbers, so let's pause there for a second. What's important is that the fractional 1/10 ounce silver had a spread of $45.90, while this 90% constitutional had a spread of $28.52. And this is the part that most people miss. Both products are still silver, both products will still track the same underlying metal, but one of them is significantly more expensive to enter. So the real question becomes, if both forms of silver give me fractional exposure, why am I paying significantly more per ounce for one of them? because at the end of the day, what I'm aiming to achieve is exposure to silver. It doesn't change the metal, it only changes the package. And when I'm dollar cost averaging, the packaging cost adds up a lot because every dollar spent on premium is a dollar that did not buy silver. So let's go ahead and make an example. Let's say I have $1,000 to invest. With 1/10 ounce silver bullion at $108.90 per ounce equivalent, I can acquire about 9.18 ounces of silver. So if we compare that to 90% silver at $73.78 per ounce equivalent, I can acquire 13.55 ounces of silver. And that's not a small difference. That's nearly 48% more silver for the same money. Almost half as much more exposure. So right away, we're not talking about small differences here. But let's take it a step further. Using that same dealer price, the break-even point for 1/10 of an ounce of silver was $115.05 per ounce. And the break-even point for 90% silver was $97.67 per ounce. And that's a difference of $17.13 per ounce in silver spot movement. So what does that actually mean? It means that the 90% silver becomes profitable at a much lower price movement. Before fractional bullion even breaks even, 90% silver has already crossed that threshold. So we'll translate this into something real. If silver moves from $97.67 up to $115.05, that is the $17.38 move. During that move, that position in 90% silver has already profited. That 13.55 ounces gains $235 in profit before the fractional silver even gets to break even. Now, I want you to really think about this because this is where the argument is becoming very interesting. The fractional bullion holder has better liquidity, but the 90% silver holder has more exposure working in the market. And in this scenario, in this current market, it seems like exposure is mattering more than the elegance and prestige of pure bullion. I'll be honest here. 90% silver is not perfect. It is less liquid, it is not as standardized, and it is not as clean. It requires a lot more handling, more sorting, and more explanation in some cases. And that's exactly why it trades at a lower premium. The market is literally pricing in inconvenience. But here's the question I keep coming back to. How much should liquidity cost? Because liquidity is not free. You pay it upfront in the premium, and the premium reduces the amount of silver you can actually own. So the question becomes, do I want easier exit or do I want more ounces working for me while I hold? Now, I want to connect this to something bigger because my channel is not just about stacking silver. It's about building generational wealth. And when I work it into that framework, my questions change a little bit. I stop asking what's the easiest to sell next month and I start asking what maximizes long-term accumulation per dollar. Because if I'm slowly building a reserves over years, if I'm dollar cost averaging into sound money, then ounces matter more than the packaging. Every unnecessary premium in silver is a premium I will never recover. And over time, that compounds, which means efficiency of entry becomes just as important as the asset itself. Now, let me bring this back to something physical because numbers are one thing, but seeing it is another. I store my 90% silver in bags of $140 face value. It's pretty easy to find a bag of $100 face value on the market, but that ends up being 71.5 ounces. $140 of face value is roughly equivalent to 100 ounces of silver. And this becomes a lot easier to track and manage. And that's what I've been doing here in this video. I've been counting all of this 90% silver so that I can store it in these bags of $140 face value. So, does this answer the question? Is 90% better than fractional bullion? Well, really, it depends entirely on what you're optimizing for. If you want maximum liquidity and clean resale, then fractional bullion does make sense. But if you're optimizing for accumulation, if you're trying to convert dollars into the maximum amount of silver possible, then 90% silver starts to look very different because you're not sacrificing value, you're trading liquidity for volume. And over long periods of time, that trade may matter more than most people realize. If you like the video, make sure you go give it a thumbs up, go into the comment section to start a conversation or continue one, subscribe if you haven't already, and share the video to someone you think may need to hear this. To my long-term subscribers, thank you so much for your continual support, and of course, go check out josephsreserves.com for my merchandise, zip-up bags, and my It's Today Again coffee. But most of all, thank you so much for watching, and just remember, every ounce adds up, so no matter how small, just keep stacking.